Richmond Palace was cloaked in silence, every servant and courtier bound by an oath never to reveal what they were about to witness. As the attendants carefully stripped away the heavy robes and ornate costume that had been Queen Elizabeth's armor for almost 50 years, they came upon a sight so dreadful it would be locked away in secrecy, hidden beneath coffins and official lies for more than 4 centuries. Beneath the painted face and glittering jewels was not simply an aging queen worn down by illness and poison. What they uncovered shook the very pillars of royal legitimacy, calling into question the power of the Protestant crown, and even the true identity of the woman who had ruled England for nearly half a century. The official tale claimed Elizabeth slipped quietly from life after a short sickness, her reign ending with the grace and dignity befitting a great monarch. But scraps of forbidden testimony, coded messages, and half-destroyed papers tell a darker story. They describe a body eaten away by decades of poison, with flesh blackened and peeling, and strange features that no physician could explain. The accounts whisper of grotesque discoveries, so shocking that those who saw them were silenced, immediately sworn to secrecy under threat of death. Some were separated from their families forever, and at least one person disappeared from all records as if they had never existed. But this mystery does not begin in 1603. Its roots reach back to Elizabeth's earliest years, when she was still a frightened child navigating the deadly game of the Tudor court. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, was executed when Elizabeth was not yet 3, condemned on charges created by a king desperate for a son. This brutal loss left the young girl with a chilling lesson. A woman's body was both her greatest weapon and her greatest danger. She saw her father dismiss and destroy wives as if they were pawns in a game, and she watched her sister Mary endure false pregnancies that became the target of cruel jokes. From these experiences, Elizabeth understood that to survive, she must turn her own body into something more than human, an untouchable symbol wrapped in paint, steel, and ritual. By the time she took the throne in 1558, this transformation had already begun. Each day, thick layers of Venetian ceruse, a deadly white lead paste, were smeared across her skin until her face looked less like a person and more like a mask. This was no act of vanity. Her ghostly white complexion became a stage costume for politics, signaling virginity, purity, and England's Protestant strength against Catholic Europe. Yet, what looked like perfection to her subjects was slow poison. The lead crept beneath her skin, filling her bones and organs, eating her from within. Her corsets were equally brutal. Reinforced with whalebone, iron, and sometimes even wood, they were laced so tightly that servants had to brace themselves with both feet against her back to pull the strings into place. The crushing pressure, strong enough to crack ribs and shift organs, became her daily companion for over 4 decades. Surviving examples of similar garments show they squeezed the lungs, pressed against the liver, and left the body starved of oxygen, causing permanent damage over time. Elizabeth wore them for up to 16 hours a day, long past the point of pain. The Virgin Queen was more than a title, it was a shield. By refusing marriage, Elizabeth kept absolute control of her throne, power that would have vanished the moment she accepted a husband. But some believe her choice went beyond politics. In her 20s and 30s, when pressure to wed was overwhelming, Elizabeth hinted at a mysterious obstacle that made marriage impossible. Courtiers speculated wildly. Was it scars from childhood illness? A hidden deformity? Or something stranger still? The truth was concealed beneath gowns, cosmetics, and rigid armor, and only death would strip away the disguise. As the years dragged on, the cost of her unnatural beauty and punishing routine became impossible to ignore. Her body bore the weight of the poison and pressure she had endured, until the very mask she had crafted to protect her power consumed her from the inside out. The white paint that once gave Elizabeth her famous mask-like face slowly began to betray her. Instead of hiding her age, it tore her skin apart, leaving deep pits and dark stains of blue and black across her cheeks. Her teeth turned rotten, crumbling away one by one until her smile became something to fear, not admire. Embarrassed, she often covered her mouth with her hand when speaking, as though trying to shield herself from the world. Her hair, once a proud crown of red, thinned out in uneven clumps until she had no choice but to rely on heavier and more extravagant wigs. Beneath the splendid gowns and glittering jewels, her body told a far uglier story. Her skin oozed with sores that never healed, poisoned by the dyes of her clothing and crushed by the merciless grip of corsets. The bitter irony was impossible to ignore. The very things that were meant to keep her forever youthful were slowly destroying her from the inside out. Every solution only worsened the problem. Ointments laced with mercury left her mind clouded and shaky. Belladonna drops dripped into her eyes to make them look wide and dazzling, instead blurred her sight over time. The more her body broke down, the more she needed makeup to cover the damage, and every fresh coat of powder only added more poison to her blood. By the 1590s, appearing in public had become a performance as carefully staged as any play. It could take 4 long hours to paint her face, fix her wig, and dress her in layer after layer of silk and jewels. Courtiers were allowed close enough to marvel at the dazzling Queen of England, but never so near that they might notice the truth behind the illusion. Mirrors were banished from her presence. She couldn't bear to see the woman behind the mask. Elizabeth wasn't just ruling anymore, she was acting out the role of the Virgin Queen, while the real person withered away behind costumes and paint. Doctors at court described her suffering in cryptic words, careful not to record too much. They wrote about odd swellings, treatments with leeches, and endless doses of purging medicines meant to cleanse the blood. In one secret journal, a physician admitted that when he lanced a festering sore on her chest in 1592, he found strange, unnatural growths that seemed to blur the line between male and female flesh. His notes hinted at things not of God's design, fueling rumors about what secrets her body truly held. The final 10 years of her life sped up her downfall. After a fierce illness in 1593, she began to drift into strange episodes, forgetting where she was and talking to ghosts of the past, including her mother, dead for decades. These moments, likely signs of her poisoned brain, were hidden at all costs. To keep up appearances, the Privy Council even arranged for doubles to dress in her clothing and mimic her from afar when she was too unwell to appear in person. By 1599, her body changed again. Her stomach grew so large and misshapen that tailors had to secretly add hidden panels into her gowns, allowing her to maintain her famous silhouette. But her face told the truth. The lead had transformed it into something monstrous. A Venetian ambassador who once saw her without makeup confessed in horror that her skin was riddled with holes and grooves, her color gray and lifeless like a corpse. The sight haunted him in his dreams for weeks. As the new century dawned, things grew worse. Around 1602, Elizabeth likely suffered several strokes. Her speech slurred, her left side grew weak, and she lost control over her own body in ways that left her humiliated. Special garments were sewn to conceal these accidents, while attendants carefully dressed, painted, and propped her up like a puppet, ready to catch her if she staggered. By the last winter of 1603, the Queen was more dead than alive. Rotting ulcers opened on her legs, oozing with such a stench that servants kept pots of burning herbs around the chamber just to make the air breathable. The wounds blackened with gangrene, the flesh decaying while she still breathed. Strange growths spread across her body, described by witnesses as looking like barnacles, perhaps tumors or terrible side effects from years of toxic treatments. In those final months, the once mighty ruler who had stared down kings and armies now slipped further into madness. Her body was collapsing, her mind drifting into shadows, and the image of glorious Elizabeth was held together only by powder, fabric, and fear. In her final weeks, Elizabeth often stood motionless for hours, insisting that if she dared to sit or lie down, death would seize her instantly. Food was nearly impossible for her to swallow. Painful ulcers in her throat burned with every attempt, and when she managed a few bites, they came back up in a spray of blood and thick black fluid her doctors called bile. Her weight dropped so low that beneath the layers of padded gowns, she was little more than skin and bone. The most terrible secret of those last days was a growth her physicians recorded only in coded Latin, calling it a monster within the body. Near her left breast bulged a lump the size of a goose egg, purple-black in color, streaked with veins that seemed to pulse on their own. When it was cut open, it bled thick, tar-like blood with a metallic stench. Some believed it to be cancer. Others whispered about something parasitic. The most horrifying rumors said the mass contained strands of hair and small teeth, signs of a grotesque growth known as a teratoma. On March 23, 1603, the nightmare reached its climax. Elizabeth was struck by a violent seizure that shook her body for nearly an hour. Bloody foam poured from her lips, and when the fit ended, she lay still for so long that those around her thought the end had come. Then, with startling clarity, she turned to Robert Cecil and muttered, "It feels as if an iron chain is choking me. Everything is changed now." Her final hours remained clouded in mystery. Some witnesses described her body twisting into unnatural shapes. Others swore they heard disturbing noises echoing from within her chest. Dr. Richard Manningham, present at her death, later admitted that her skin seemed to ripple as though something moved beneath it. When death finally arrived, it was not calm or holy, it was violent, as if something inside her was being torn away. The official record states she died at 3 o'clock in the morning on March 24, 1603. What followed was hidden under the strictest secrecy. Her body was hurriedly bound in waxed cloth before rigor mortis could set in, then locked inside a lead coffin and sealed at once. There was no death mask, no public viewing, no grand lying in state. Everyone present was forced to swear silence under penalty of execution. Only 3 people were involved in preparing the corpse: Dr. Manningham, Lady Helena Snakenborg, and an unnamed clergyman. What they saw explained why such secrecy was necessary. Her garments had fused into her skin with dried blood and pus. The corset, worn so tightly for decades, had become part of her body, the whalebone pressing into her ribs. When it was pried away, strips of dead flesh tore loose with it. Her ribcage was permanently crushed inward, her lower ribs bent upward, forcing her liver into her chest and squeezing her stomach until it was barely functional. The organs inside were shriveled, blackened, and scarred from years of lead poisoning. When her painted mask was wiped away, the truth beneath was worse than rumor. Her skin was webbed with dark veins, etched into intricate patterns by poison. In places, the flesh had rotted through to bone. The skull itself was warped, softened by the toxins, with parts so thin they bent like wax. At the crown of her head, doctors found a spongy soft spot like the fontanelle of an infant that pulsed with its own rhythm. The greatest shock came when the lower half of her body was examined. What they uncovered was neither entirely male nor female, but a strange combination of both. The outer features were unclear, suggesting a disorder at birth. Where an opening should have been, old scar tissue sealed it shut. The womb inside was wasted, dried out like a shriveled fruit, with strange mineral-like growths scattered throughout. This revelation cast new light on her lifelong refusal to marry and the mysterious impediment she had once mentioned. Was this the true reason she remained the Virgin Queen? Or did it mean the ruler of England for 45 years had been someone who could never be neatly defined as man or woman? The questions raised that night were too dangerous to be spoken aloud, and so the truth was buried in silence, locked inside her coffin, and erased from the world. Every rule she passed, every noble title she handed out, every choice she made could be called into question if people ever learned that the Queen didn't fit neatly into society's strict ideas of what a man or woman should be. When Dr. Manningham examined her, he said what he found inside her body didn't make sense at all. He spoke of strange organs that shouldn't even exist, like a smaller heart tucked close to the stomach, bits of lung tissue lodged in the belly, and even bones forming in places where bones had no business being. When he carefully studied her head, he saw how badly the lead makeup had damaged her brain. Inside were tiny rock-like lumps that cracked open to reveal what looked like tiny pearls or even small eggs. The blood that drained from her wasn't red like everyone else's. It came out thick and black, almost like tar mixed with oil, and it gave off a metallic, rotten stench. When this strange liquid touched silver instruments, they blackened instantly, as though the blood itself corroded them. To make matters worse, parts of it seemed to twitch and creep across the table on its own before going still, as if it had a mind of its own. Her back told a story of years trapped in crushing corsets. Her spine was bent and misshaped, the bones pressed so tightly together they grew small spikes that pushed out like tiny horns. The skin above them was rough and scaly, nothing like normal flesh. All of this painted a picture not of a woman simply dying, but of a body twisted into something both beyond and beneath what we would call human. The three people who saw these horrors knew they couldn't tell a soul. If they did, it would shatter the crown's fragile stability, throw the kingdom into chaos, and give Catholic enemies the perfect excuse to say God had cursed England's queen. So they swore to bury the truth. Elizabeth's body was locked away in the most secure way possible, layer after layer of cloth. Sealed inside not one, but 2 lead coffins, smothered with mercury, chained shut, and carved with holy symbols to keep whatever secrets it held from ever getting out. Then, the witnesses were scattered. Manningham was shipped off to Scotland under a false name. Lady Helena was pushed into a convent, sworn never to speak again. The minister vanished from history altogether. Everything connected to her body was destroyed. The blood-stained floor ripped out, the wooden table burned, and even medical notes, diaries, and private letters erased or confiscated. In official records, her death was rewritten as gentle and uneventful, the peaceful end of an aging queen. Yet whispers refused to die. The Bisley Boy legend claimed Elizabeth had been a child who died young, secretly replaced by a boy to keep the throne secure. Most call it nonsense, but the strange body found after her death makes the story harder to dismiss. Her ambiguous sex, her broad shoulders, her unusual skeleton, all of it matched unsettlingly well with the rumor that England's beloved queen may not have been the woman she appeared to be. Even her most famous words, "I may have the body of a weak woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king," begin to sound less symbolic and more like a hidden truth. Her constant refusal to let doctors examine her below the neck feels less like modesty and more like someone protecting a lifelong secret. Today, medical experts can only guess. Maybe it was decades of lead and mercury poisoning twisting her body from the inside out. Maybe she was born with a rare disorder that affected sexual development, giving her traits of both man and woman. Some even suggest growths inside her body, like tumors filled with teeth and hair, slowly changed her throughout her life. Others argue she may have been genetically male but appeared female on the outside due to a rare condition. The truth lies sealed in her tomb at Westminster Abbey. Over the years, historians and scientists have begged to open it, but the British government always refuses, claiming it is out of respect. Many, however, believe the real reason is simple: fear of what the world might finally discover. Elizabeth is the only ruler of England whose body has never been studied or disturbed, even after centuries. Modern scans of her tomb using ground-penetrating radar show strange results: layers of heavy lead, hidden empty spaces, and even signs of metal objects that look like chains or barriers. This matches old stories that her body was sealed away with unusual precautions. Scientists who examined her surviving gowns noticed strange alterations, padding added in certain spots, stiff supports built inside the fabric, and repeated adjustments made over the years, almost as if the dresses were hiding changes in her body. Tests on objects she touched revealed shockingly high levels of lead, mercury, and arsenic, far more than normal makeup could explain. Even her wigs carried traces of lead strong enough to cause brain damage. Samples of her cosmetics showed amounts of poison that could kill instantly if swallowed, yet she spread them across her face every single day for decades. Descriptions of her behavior in letters and journals paint the picture of someone burdened by a terrible secret. Her famous vow of virginity, her refusal to marry despite constant pressure, her fierce privacy about her body, and her explosive anger when her authority was challenged all make more sense. If she was hiding something she could never allow the world to see. Her well-known line, "I may have the body of a weak and frail woman, but I have the heart and courage of a king," may have been more than just poetic, it might have been a clue. The secrecy worked. For over 400 years, the truth stayed buried. Papers were destroyed, witnesses silenced, and the history books cleaned up. Elizabeth became a symbol of England's pride and power, her image carefully polished to inspire loyalty rather than disgust. Yet not every trace of truth was erased. In the 20th century, Lady Snackenborg's hidden diary was decoded, where she wrote that she did not see the body of a queen, but something that wore her form like a disguise. Dr. Manningham's notes described medical conditions that seemed impossible for a human. An unknown minister scribbled a single chilling line in his Bible, "I have seen proof that the devil can wear a crown." May God forgive us for hiding it. The weight of this mystery goes beyond Elizabeth herself. If the monarch who ruled for 45 years was not who she claimed to be, what does that say about every choice she made? The rise of Protestant England, the defeat of Spain's Armada, even the early building blocks of the British Empire, were they all decided by someone whose very identity may have been a lie? Hints can also be found in her closest relationships. Robert Dudley, her lifelong companion, once said she had a secret powerful enough to shake all of Christendom. Mary, Queen of Scots, wrote in frustration that Elizabeth was less than a woman. More than a woman, something in between. For centuries, such words were dismissed as insults or political games. But now they seem strangely connected to what we know. Household records from Elizabeth's court reveal suspicious expenses, payments to tailors for unusual garments, orders for excessive amounts of cloth, and money given to craftsmen who built devices to adjust the human form. These could have been normal extravagances or proof of disguises created to protect her secret. Even foreign ambassadors picked up on the oddities. Several wrote that Elizabeth was taller than most women, broad-shouldered, with a deep voice and a bold stride. The Spanish envoy noted she moved like a man dressed in women's clothing. The French ambassador described her hands as rough and strong, more suited to a stonemason than a queen. Hidden behind layers of royal splendor was a body that left even her peers unsettled, a mystery still locked away in her tomb. Elizabeth's private writings show a woman deeply troubled about who she really was. In her poems, she often mentioned masks, disguises, and hidden truths. In one haunting line she confessed, "I am not the person you think I am. The face you see is only a cover. Under the crown and silks lies something that must always remain secret." For centuries, people assumed this was only a clever metaphor, but maybe it was far more personal than anyone wanted to believe. The strange medical signs Elizabeth showed throughout her life point to complicated health problems. Long-term lead poisoning could explain her constant headaches, weak body, and rotting teeth, but it doesn't explain the unusual body features found after her death. Some conditions tied to genetics might explain why her sexual development seemed unclear, but even those don't match all the evidence. What doctors describe as a possible tumor, something that grows inside the body with hair, teeth, or bones, suggests yet another puzzle. A few modern researchers think she might not have had just one problem, but many at once. Maybe a genetic disorder, combined with years of smearing her skin with toxic makeup, and even a tumor, all clashed together to shape her body in unnatural ways. Her beauty rituals would have been dangerous to anyone, but for someone already fragile, they were disastrous. The lid powders, mercury cures, and arsenic creams she used every day could warp the body from the inside. Tightly laced corsets may have twisted her bones further, making her frame look strange. And on top of that, the crushing pressure of hiding the truth, always pretending to be what people expected, likely damaged her mind, especially in her final years when her behavior grew more unstable. This leads to the chilling question: if she truly wasn't what people thought, when did the disguise begin? Some stories say the real Elizabeth died as a child and was replaced by a boy from Bisley. Others suggest she was born with both male and female traits, and as she aged, the masculine side became harder to hide. Her makeup, once a tool for beauty, may have become a desperate mask to cover her changing face. When she died, the throne passed to James VI of Scotland without chaos, which is surprising. It hints that powerful people worked hard to keep any questions about her identity quiet. James may have even been told some of the truth, which could explain why his first command was that Elizabeth's tomb should never be opened. Right after, he ordered many of her private papers destroyed and paid off her closest servants, demanding they remain silent. Even the Catholic Church, which had attacked her for years as a false queen, suddenly went quiet. Some historians believe they made a bargain silence about her condition in exchange for James giving Catholics more freedom. If that's true, then even her fiercest enemies thought what they knew was too explosive to share. Today, science could solve the mystery in days. The lead coffin likely kept her body well preserved. DNA tests could reveal her genetic sex, chromosome patterns, and hidden disorders. Chemical studies could measure how much poison was in her system. Examining her bones could confirm the deformities witnesses once described. But her grave remains locked. Every request to investigate has been denied, officially to protect history. Yet many wonder if the real reason is fear of what might finally come to light. Until someone dares to open that tomb, we're left with scraps of the past notes from those who risked everything to write down what they saw, odd relics that survived, and suspicious holes in the record. Together, they paint a picture of a ruler who was more than just human. Someone who bent nature, poison, and raw willpower to keep a secret so powerful that even centuries later, it still feels too dangerous to face. The strange story of Elizabeth's body is really about the heavy cost of power and just how far people and governments will go to keep a myth alive. The woman praised as the Virgin Queen, a figure who stood for England's Protestant pride, may have been far from what people believed. By the end of her life, she may not have been a virgin, not entirely a queen in the traditional sense, and perhaps not even fully human. The very body that became a symbol of England's strength may itself have been a fabrication reshaped, poisoned, and twisted by years of desperate attempts to protect her image. What lies sealed in Westminster Abbey isn't only the remains of a monarch, but the remains of one of the most carefully crafted lies in history. The famous line she once spoke, "I may have the body of a weak and fragile woman, but I have the heart and courage of a king," may have carried more truth than anyone realized. Her refusal to marry, explained at the time as a mysterious personal choice, might have been an attempt to keep a devastating secret hidden. If exposed, it would not only have destroyed her crown, but shaken the very legitimacy of England itself. The endless efforts to turn Elizabeth from a living, breathing person into a symbol came at a terrible price. Lead in her makeup slowly poisoned her. Mercury treatments pushed her mind toward madness. Arsenic burned her skin. Tight corsets warped her bones. Layers of clothing concealed horrifying changes in her body. In the end, what was left was hardly recognizable as human, something grotesque, kept standing only by makeup and sheer force of will. A queen on the outside, perhaps a monster underneath. The scariest part isn't just what Elizabeth herself became, but what her condition revealed about the nature of power. A monarch's body, which people were told was holy and untouchable, was in truth corrupted, broken, and maybe even fraudulent. The Virgin Queen, meant to symbolize purity, was in reality hiding rot and deformity. To many who knew the truth, it might have seemed more like a divine curse than a blessing. But these contradictions were kept secret. They were recorded, but locked away, because exposing them would have torn apart the story that England's rulers needed their people to believe. 3 witnesses, Dr. Manningham, Lady Snakenborg, and a minister whose name remains lost, saw enough to understand. What they witnessed shook their ideas of nature, of God, and of royal authority itself. Faced with the choice of truth or silence, they chose silence. By doing so, they kept the country stable, even if it meant burying the truth forever. Their silence allowed the shining image of Gloriana to live on, while the grim reality decayed inside a lead-lined coffin. Even now, centuries later, Elizabeth still rests in Westminster Abbey, her body locked away not just by layers of lead, but also by law and legend. The Virgin Queen is such a deep part of England's identity that revealing the real story could shake the nation even today. She once declared, "I do not wish to peer into men's souls." In a dark twist of fate, no one has been allowed to peer into the reality of her own body. The mystery endures because it has to endure. Some secrets are too dangerous to share, some myths too important to destroy. Elizabeth herself seemed to understand this better than anyone, turning her own body into a political symbol that outlived her flesh. She achieved a strange kind of immortality, not in spite of her ruined body, but because of it. And so, as we close this unsettling investigation, we're left with questions that may never be answered. Was Elizabeth really who she claimed to be? What was hidden beneath the lead makeup, the royal dresses, and the carefully managed image? What truth was so horrifying that it required burning records, silencing witnesses, and burying all evidence in a sealed tomb? The answers remain locked inside Westminster Abbey, guarded by centuries of silence and the belief that some truths are too terrible to uncover. The Virgin Queen's dreadful secret, kept hidden for more than 400 years, was not just one shocking fact, but a chain of horrors. A body broken by poison, bones crushed by corsets, organs that didn't belong, blood that seemed unnatural, sexual features that didn't fit into ordinary categories, and above it all, the possibility that the ruler of England for nearly half a century may not have been Elizabeth Tudor at all, but someone, or even something, entirely different. This is what it costs to keep a myth alive, the sacrifice of flesh and the hiding of truth. Elizabeth gave up her own body to become a symbol, and in the end, that very body carried the power to undo everything she had worked for. Her secret was locked away with her, sealed in layers of lead and silence, a truth England could never bring itself to face. Even now, after 4 centuries, it feels too frightening to speak aloud. The Virgin Queen lives on in stories and paintings not because of who she truly was, but because the reality of her condition, what she became or maybe what she had always been, was too unsettling to ever admit. When people remember her, they often point to her great victories, the crushing of the Spanish Armada, or the rise of England as a world power. But maybe her greatest accomplishment wasn't any of those. Maybe it was the way she managed to keep her most dangerous secret hidden for more than 400 years. She shaped her public image so carefully that even after death, even when her body revealed signs no one could explain, she still found a way to silence the truth. That was her last triumph, winning against reality itself. Today, her tomb in Westminster Abbey is not only a grave, but also a monument to the force of secrecy, to the strange need for myths, and to the heavy price of protecting illusions. Inside, locked in lead and legend, rests proof of a transformation so shocking that the few who saw it chose to erase it from history rather than let the world know. And so the truth waits, hidden in the darkness, quiet, terrifying, and still too dangerous to uncover even now.